is yours.
Hello, everyone.
How we doing, everybody? Welcome. Thank you for coming. The paper today are Consumers Who Maximize. I'm Daniel Addick. I'm the associate professor at Seton Hall University. I'm also the director of the MBA program. This is the clicker. This is my little recording device because the family locator could not make the trip, and they really wanted to know what was going on with the session. So I'm just doing a little audio recording, if you're wondering what this is. Also, all the students who participated in the study, I had not told them a thing about the study because I didn't want to bias any of the data. So this is going to be a way for them to be able to see what they participated in. So what I'm going to do today, a quick overview, I'm going to talk about the difference between consumers who maximize and consumers who satisfice. I'll do a very short literature review. I'll talk briefly about the study. I'll present some results. And what I want more than anything else is some future research ideas. So maximizers and satisficers. We basically live in a world, particularly Western world, of hyper-choice, overabundance of choice. Now, the common maximum is, if I have a lot of choice, I'm going to be happy. If I have more choices, I'm good. I'd rather have more choices than not. And this has been studied to the point where we actually have a U-shaped curve. You can come in. Where no choices, people are not happy. Some choice, people are very happy. Too much choice, they're unhappy again. It's basically cognitive overload. I found out about this. I was on a plane ride, and remember we used to buy magazines in the airport? Well, I bought out Psychology Today in the airport, and the way down to visit some of my buddies in my PhD program, I saw this little blurb about the paradox of choice, and it was a professor from Swarthmore, Barry Schwartz. He wrote a very interesting book, and I've been addicted to this construct ever since. This is the 2004 book, The Paradox of Choice. So, briefly, maximizers are consumers who examine all possible options. They are very data intensive. They look at everything they possibly can. They eventually make a choice. And usually post hoc, they want to change their mind, and they want to go through the entire process again, because they think a better choice still exists. Satisficers are people that look at fewer choices. They find some level of threshold, make a decision, and then tend not to look back. Satisficers typically do not second-guess their decisions. They have significantly less buyer's regret. Now, before everybody's trying to figure out whether you're a satisficer or a maximizer in this room, both of these are good options. One is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. There are significant advantages to being a maximizer. There is significant disadvantages to being a maximizer. There are significant advantages to being a satisficer. There are significant disadvantages to being a satisficer. So don't think that one is better than the other. I actually talk about this in terms of max, just because that's where the literature is, but I'm not advocating one over the other. Yes?
I would expect that there's some research that's related to this in the area of finance as well. But I would think that it has to do with the value or the cost of the purchase that you're making. When you're going to more likely be a maximizer when you're buying a house or a car than if you're buying toothpaste.
In one study that I'm going to show you in a second, the satisficer will switch to being a maximizer in higher involvement purchasing. Maximizers are always maximizers regardless of involvement. Primarily. So quick previous research. This was Schwartz's original study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, which he wrote the book from. He found people that were higher in max have positive correlations for regret, perfectionism, depression, negative correlations between happiness, optimism, satisfaction with life, and self-esteem. Maximizing tends to worsen the negative effect of hyperchoice. And this is too many choices. Maximizers tend to have cognitive overload. Satisficers will see a whole lot of choice, just say, oh, okay, I like blue today, and pick blue and move on, and then that's it. They won't necessarily make a better choice, but they'll find some level of comfort and move on. Maximizers will tend to look at all possible options every time they possibly can. So there was an article published in Marketing Letters, which is this article, where myself and a bunch of colleagues were playing with this construct, and we were trying to figure out how to position it in the literature. We saw this article, and we saw that maximizers spent significantly more time and felt more time pressure to make a decision. And a bunch of other studies also, the first paper, the 2009 paper, actually measured it in milliseconds. They did a study on a computer, and they measured how long it took, the satisficers took, the maximizers took, and it was statistically significant, no problem. So maximizers take significantly longer time than satisficers to make a decision. Okay. So we came along, myself and a bunch of colleagues, we wanted to, well, that's the present tense. We wonder if maximizers have a problem with past data, previous experience. Okay? We call this the Sisyphus effect. We know our Greek mythology with Sisyphus rolling the ball up the hill. That power of regret is very powerful for maximizers. And that's how we frame the paper in terms of regret. Regret had a significant impact on behavioral intentions in our paper. Buying, satisfaction, this was a purchase type scenario. But the higher feelings of regret were not strong enough for a maximizer not to rethink the entire thing over again and start over, which is where we got this idea of Sisyphus. You know, because maximizers, if given the choice, they would start over from ground zero, completely delete all information that they've experienced in the past to find a better option the second time around. So the regret wasn't strong enough to get them to stop. So the first paper from the other authors were about the present. We looked at the past, and then we decided to do another paper and look at the future. And would you know that maximizers also ignored future intention? That they wanted to make the perfect decision now, but at the same time, any future consequences of this decision they completely ignored. So they decided to forget about past, they decided to forget about future, and only get locked in on the task at hand. We explain this in terms of research slap game, and there's some very good papers by Zuberman and Lynch in this area, where maximizers tended to overestimate the amount of time they had to make a decision, and they tended to get locked into the present and forget about the past and also ignore potential future consequences. So it was we call this the trilogy. We only wrote 2 of the 3 papers in the trilogy. There was the present, the past, and the future, but it worked really well in the literature. And again, there is nothing wrong with being a maximizer versus being a satisficer. In a previous study that I didn't talk about here, they looked at undergraduate students and applying for jobs. The maximizer students applied for more jobs, they did more work, they got higher pay, they got better jobs than all the satisficers do. There's nothing wrong with being a maximizer. So, my main research question with this study is the maximization tendency consistent over time? At the moment, there's been some argument in the literature whether max is a state or a trait. And right now, there's a bunch of articles in JCR arguing it's more of a state, that you can induce it. I actually feel that the max side of it is trait, and the satisficing side of it is state. And that's one of the things that I wanted to get at, but not with this study. So that was one research question. The second one is, can friends predict if a friend is max or sat? I have a really good friend of mine, and I know them really well. Can I predict whether they're max or sat or not? And finally, does the maximization construct, this is really where I need your help, future research ideas. What other interesting avenues of research, if you've never heard about this construct before, what other ideas from a research perspective do you have? So what I did was a triad study. I found 30 students, and each student found 2 of their really good friends. So we have a triad. I'm going to show you in a second. I did 3 different data collection periods. The week before finals and finals, I had like a 2-week window. as soon as they came back in mid-January, when they had no stress whatsoever, and finally in mid-February, when maybe like midterms were starting to peep up and they had some things. So here's the triad. Participant 1 rated their own measure of status maximization. They also rated their two friends' level of whether they thought it was max. Friend here rated their self and their two friends. Friend there rated themselves and their two friends. So I had a triad. So some results. The reason why I have some results, because in my mind I thought the triads would hold across. I selected very, very bright leadership students as my original one of the 30, and they had to find two of their really good friends, and I was hoping that was going to work out. I had a lot of people drop out, too many. I also had people, even though they had two friends, pick two totally different friends to measure whether they were max or sat. So there were some issues there. So we had some missing data. So let's call this a pretest. I probably shouldn't have did triads. I probably should have did dyads. But is the maximization tendency consistent over time? I split the data into thirds, like sat, a mixed, and then max. So I have three groups, and the satisficer group and the maximizer group across the 3 time periods did not switch from their positions. You know, in December, in January, in March, May, February, they did not. The mixed people in the middle did. Like if I did a median split on the data and I looked at the positions, it was, I can see them moving back across the median split. So yes, they stayed consistent over time. Now granted, they were not stimulated with anything in particular. They were not pushed into being a satisficer or a maximizer. I was just asking them to see if it was consistent over time, and it was. Can a close friend also predict if someone is a maximizer? The results were way, way, way too messy. I had a few cases where all 3 of them were sat, the original participant and the 2 friends, and a few cases where all 3 of them were max, and they were consistent over time. But what I did not code is whether someone was a max person measuring a sat person measuring a max person, and whether that's consistent or not. Right now, if you look at the chart, I cannot say one way or the other. I need to do some finer coding with this, and when I go back, I'm going to have one of my grad students do that. All right, now future research. This is where I need your help. You now know what max people are like. You know what sat people are like. Here's some other constructs. So I'm going to read the construct, and you're going to tell me. I have 5 slides left. Thank you. Grit is a passionate commitment to a single mission, unanswering dedication to achieve that mission. Here's some of the items. Someone high in grit should be more max or more sat. What do we think? I have arguments for both sides. I wanted to test it. Unfortunately, I was expecting to see maximizers as more gritty, more determined to make. I actually didn't see a clear pattern significantly between these two for the grit scale. Might have been the small sample size, but I didn't see a clear pattern here. Next one, self-monitoring. This is a classic one. Self-monitors are like networkers, that they have the ability to change their behavior given the situation and given the people. So a high self-monitor can be more chameleon-like, a low self-monitor cannot. They're usually consistent all the time regardless of the situation. So who's max and who's sat? A high self-monitor would be max people are low self-monitors. They do not change their behavior given the situation. Sat people will change their behavior given the situation. Max people will not. That one was kind of expected. Personal need for structure, a desire for people to look for ways to reduce cognitive information load. Who wants to reduce cognitive information load? Sat people or max people? Right. So if you were high in this, you were sat. If you were low in this, you were max. Max people have a low need for personal structure. They would rather have it wide open as possibly can because they want to search all possible options. Need for cognitive closure. I have a couple slides left. A desire to compare ambiguity, basically. Can you deal with ambiguity? And Gruhl and colleagues operationalize this for desire for predictability, order and structure, ambiguity, decisiveness, and closed-mindedness. Desire for predictability, max people have a low preference for predictability. Preference for order and structure, max people have a low preference for order and structure. Discomfort with ambiguity, max people have a low discomfort with ambiguity, they're okay with ambiguity. Decisiveness, max people are not decisive. They want all possible options, they want to keep things open. Closed-mindedness, max people have a very open mind, they are not closed-minded. They look at all possible options. So, that was my last slide, thank you. I'm looking for other constructs to explore with max and sats. And if you can think of any, I'd be happy to throw them into a study, because any way I can extend this construct and write more papers, I'm happier. And I have to acknowledge my incredible wife, who's here, that I met in Panama at a wedding.
His primary subject for this study is the last slicer to the tea.
I am a sat slicer to the tea. And we make an incredible team. Absolutely. And by the way, I've done a number of studies with this. This is not a gender thing. Gender is never significant in max studies. It's not a gender thing.
I'm a sat, my wife's a max. Like textbook, both of us. It's amazing. This was very cool.
But we test it all the time. One of my other co-authors, he's a sat. His significant other is a max. We keep sending. It's not a gender thing. It's not a gender thing.
Where's my husband? Is max and sat. Clearly.
It's not a gender thing. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That's why you should have, instead of triads, do us in terms of spouses or couples that know each other better, in terms of being able to predict or...
That's exactly what I was thinking, but for business, I was thinking maybe you could do something instead of couples, business partners, people who are actually in business together, and see if sats and sats or sats and maxes work better together, and how they can optimize their business, within the framework of your... Really, it's a psychological...
it's a behavioral tendency.
Yeah.
It's behavioral tendency.
Yeah.
It's behavioral tendency. And it's a short scale that I throw it into every study I ever do, because it's a short scale. Why not?
It's easy to use, exactly.
And it's easy to use, and you do...
That's great. Okay, Richard.
Okay? Thank you. Very good. Thank you.